Yeah, I always talk in my videos about plant diversity, and I need to explain that a lot better. And I also need to explain how I try my best to have the most diverse garden that I possibly can. How do you do that? Where do you get all these different plants from? How does it work? That's the most interesting thing about gardening if you want a really great looking, spectacular gardening. Adding plant diversity does so many things for your garden. So I want to go through the process of explaining how that actually works. So what I do in the yard is I have all these types of containers that have all different plants and seeds germinating in them. And what that does is it opens a lot of doors for me. And what I mean by that is if I plant these seedlings in different parts of the garden, I've introduced new plants. What happens is by introducing these new seedlings, I'm attracting different insects, different rodents, different birds, and they in return will make this garden more diverse by dropping them. So there's so many ways to get all these different plants into your garden without doing anything. We have so many seedlings in here that I have no idea where they came from. We have trees, fruit trees, all kinds of weird stuff that just simply showed up. Why? Because this will flower and attract a bird, or this will create a fruit and they'll eat the fruit and carry it on, and they will come here and bring other seeds with them. Yeah, when you add plant diversity to your garden, you're adding health to your garden. You're adding that diversity that makes everything live together better. It makes everything create more nutrients for each other. This companionship of plants is very interesting. A lot of us consider it not good, not effective. But if you really have these plants growing into each other and working together, they're doing so many things that promote a forward movement in your garden. So plant diversity is very interesting because it has this very strong effect on the collective. The collective is a lot healthier. Insects don't get at your plants so easily. Everything is more diverse in its nature. They're producing better soils. Everything is healthy, and it's, I don't even know how to describe it. It is, they have a companionship that is stronger than the individuality. And that's why plant diversity is so interesting and so worthwhile trying to achieve. Okay, so plant diversity and your garden style. That's another big issue. Chaos gardening allows you to present all these different plant species. Having an organized structural garden with hedges and rows and specimen plants, it's really hard to tuck in a lot of plant diversity in a garden like that because the garden is so structured. A garden that is very structured probably would have a very hard time having 100 different plant species in that garden. With this chaos method, you can fill up your garden with, several thousand plant species because the diversity is disguised. The diversity is tucked away. The diversity doesn't show those rows and columns. The diversity is so natural looking that you almost have removed the human influence. It's hard to see that a human did this. And that is the really interesting way of chaos gardening, is when you walk away from your garden and somebody visits your garden and says, wow, this took over, everything took over. How did you do that? Or what happened here, right? It's duplicating this natural process of plants filling in bare dirt. There's an actual problem with plant diversity. So I'll give you an example here. These peppermint ferns are taking over this space. So I need to slow them down, pull them actually physically out, so the other plants that are inside here have a chance to survive. So this idea of plant diversity and plant competition is a problem that you as a gardener has to solve. And you have to pay attention that you don't have certain plants taking over the garden, because they eliminate plant diversity. You have to control the plants that are very prolific. You have to keep them in check. And that's a big way of promoting plant diversity in your garden, by keeping everything in reasonable numbers. There's too many of these peppermint ferns now, so they need to be pulled back so they don't take over this space. There's so many different plants in here. So you got to pay attention to that. These ferns grow very high. They're very, very energetic, and they have a very easy time of taking over spaces. With plant diversity, you have to be very cautious. My goal here was to have a food forest, so I had the luxury of finding lots of plants in the ditch, and my garden is sort of overcrowded with non-producing trees and shrubs. So I'm scaling back now and putting more fruit trees back and changing the deciduous and the non-fruit bearing plants, and exchanging them with plants that produce fruits. A lot of fruit trees, a lot of different things that are actually going to provide food. So that diversity is a bit of a problem, because when you set yourself a goal, I want fruit trees, I want shrubs that produce fruits. That sort of gives you a guidance where your plant diversity is going, the direction your plant diversity is going. So that makes a big difference when you have an objective of what you want in your garden and how many of these fruit trees you want. The more the better. And do you need 2 fruit trees of the same kind? Do you need 5 females to 1 male? What is the ratio? So all those things are part of this plant diversity. You have to figure that out, what those ratios are. And if you're trying to grow a food forest, well, your diversity is focusing on plants that produce fruits. Yeah, there's something interesting about plant diversity, and that is what happens in your garden. So let's say you have this guy here. If I break this guy off, if I stick this in the ground, this will grow right away. It's that prolific. My garden has maybe 20 plants like this. If I wanted to fill up the whole garden with this plant, or the 20 plants that are easy to propagate, I could do that very easily. My objective is to have diversity rather than 20 plants that do extremely well here. So what actually happens is you have to contain yourself from promoting the same plants over and over again. You have to sort of limit yourself from being trapped in constantly propagating the same plants over and over again. There's also seeds that do really well. There's so many things that in your location will do extremely well. But you have to limit those because you want to add, you're trying to add the diversity to your garden. And that is the tricky part, because the plants that do extremely well in your garden, they have the tendency of taking over on their own, and they have the tendency of doing extremely well in your garden. Okay, so there's the biggest question is, where do you get all this plant diversity from? Where can you find it? How can you source it? What I do is I do a lot of weekend trips, and I go plant hunting. Ecuador has so many beautiful plants in the ditches. Very few fruit trees, very few trees that I really want, but there's plants everywhere. Now, bringing them here is a bit of a problem because I'm clogging up my garden with trees that don't bear fruits. So the ditch vines are a little bit dangerous because you end up filling up your garden very quickly with plants that don't bear fruit. Seeds. Seeds are a huge source for finding plant diversity. It's getting very expensive to buy seeds, I also find that the seeds aren't really doing so well. You'll get a package of 20 seeds and 1 or 2 of them germinate. So this idea of introducing plant diversity by seeds is getting a lot more complicated and a lot more expensive. One of the best ways is to visit other gardeners. You know, have a couple of bags of seeds with you, do a seed exchange with them, go to seed exchanges. If you really want to introduce plant diversity to your garden, it's an effort on your part. You can find seeds on the side of the road, you can find plants everywhere. So it's this idea of being very selective and very creative getting plant diversity into your garden.